Okay, everybody, just setting everything up here. Just testing the audio. Looks like it's working now. Be right with you in a second here. Let me just try to get... Okay, tweeted that out. So let's see. Is anybody... There we go. Can you guys hear me now? Audio test. A lot to talk about tonight. Active weather continues. I had a bunch of people in the one just a second ago. I had to delete that. I had an audio issue there. I had to fix it. Turns out I just had a mute mic here. This is a new microphone I got here to try to make the video sound a bit better. And Braden says 5x5, audio and video good. All right, awesome, cool. So let's wait for a few more people to get on here. Got the convergence zone going pretty good all day today and on into tonight. It's still raging out there. I guess the weather guys didn't think that north of Seattle got enough rain yesterday, so it's making up for that. And hopefully we're not going to get any more atmospheric rivers next week, even though the models are hinting at such. Let's see, did I tweet that out? There we go. Looks like it went out. So we're just waiting for a few people to come on here before we start getting going. I'll take some questions, try to give some answers, take a look at what's coming up and what just happened here. Some of you are probably still kind of shell-shocked and not really realizing the magnitude of the kind of fall and winter we're having here. Yeah, I wouldn't mind for some sunny, warm days right about now. I'm missing the sunshine here. Okay, there we go. Looks like we're up and running now. Yeah, you can you can see the convergence zone here being spawned by these winds. Check out the west northwesterlies coming onto the Olympics here, and you can see how they go around on the north side and they wrap around the south side, and they kind of meet up here by Everett North here. It's been pretty persistent today too. This has been going on for a while now, several hours. Yeah, Phyllis is back. Yeah, I had a little audio issue there. I got it figured out here, trying to deal with a new microphone. Hopefully it sounds a little bit better. I'm pretty chilly across the region behind that front. Look at Tillamook 39. A lot of places still around 40. I'm in Centralia, Winlock 37. Seattle only 39. Everett and Arlington 35. June Lake near Mount St. Helens had 17 inches of rain since Tuesday. I believe it. That's a targeted area there. High terrain, and they were right in the thick of that atmospheric river, that moisture just streaming off the Pacific, that strong frontal system. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Wenatchee, Washington, 23.3 inches of snow in 24 hours. Just crushed the old record there by quite a bit. Brandon says shoreline just north of Seattle is having lots of flooding, encroaching on whole neighborhoods. Yeah, it's been a wild winter so far. I mean, technically, we're only like 3 weeks into winter. Technically, meteorological winter starts at December 1st, but there's no real guidelines on the dates as far as, you know, fall going into winter is not just it's not a sharp line. Yep, when it rains, it pours. I mean, this has been an intense year. Culverts are blocked. The city isn't doing anything. Is it blocked by leaves and like snow and whatnot? Am I going too far though? I'm trying to adjust this here real quick. Adjusting the video camera there a bit. Yes, I'm going to do a video on models, ensembles, how they work, where they get the data, etc. I know the basics of it, but I don't know the exact parameters that the models are changing in those individual ensemble runs. I'm assuming that each one 1 through 50 is tweaking them in the same manner each time, like between the runs that runs 4 times a day. So I assume that the tweak for each individual one is the same versus just kind of randomly tweaking data. I think that they want to have data that's easily accessible, and so when they look at these runs, they kind of know which one was tweaked in which way. But I'm going to look more into it, and I'll do an entire video on that actually. Yeah, North Camino 42 with the wind winding down. Yeah, Hoquiam 5.78 inches of rain. That's not an upslope regime into terrain either. That's just straight up stratiform rain, not even up into a mountain. That is a really impressive amount. Yeah, ensemble runs are great. It's really the future of weather forecasting. And it's great that they give us access to each individual ensemble member also. So if you go to a website like weather.us, you can actually see those 50 individual European ensemble runs. Hi, Brian. So if you wanted to go in here, you could just go to this weather.us site and you can go into, like this will be looking at the 18Z run here. And I'll just kind of give you trying to zoom out here. There we go. Let's get a look at the Pacific Northwest. Hit the thumbs up. That's right. So if we go to switch members here, you can see this here. You've got the control, and then you've got all these individual ensemble runs. You can click on each one, and you can just watch each model unfold right before you. It's really cool to see. And sometimes some of those individual members show like really powerful windstorms or really extreme snowfall events. And it's kind of fun to go through that and see how those progress and play out. Hoquiam's on the coast, yes. Just west of Aberdeen, further west from Olympia. About 2 hours from Seattle driving. Yeah, Nathan asked, with only 50 ensemble members, wouldn't the control and mean be better with as many as possible? That's a good question. I think it just becomes too much data at that point. I think it's probably been tweaked. I mean, the amount of times they're tweaking the initial data is they're probably getting a good representation of what's going on with 50 tweaks of that initial data, I would think. For example, the GFS runs 30. Here, let me show you. So if we go to GFS and we go to members, you can see it runs 30. The best free site, if you want just some free site information here, so I would recommend College of DuPage is really good. And you go to their site. There's the HER. They have the RAP, the North American model, the North American high resolution. They've got Canadian, GFS. There used to be a European data on here, but they don't. I think that's part of the pay part of it now. I'm going to take the headphones off for a bit because I can hear myself now fine. Pivotal weather is also another one that I use here. You can see I've got all that stuff bookmarked. Yeah, pivotal weather still has some European, but you can see like for pivotal weather, you can see the European they only have like certain parameters and it only goes every 24 hours, as you can see here. So it's free on the European, but it's very, you're only looking at one scan a day here. But COD is really good. I like the way their maps look. So let's go ahead and look at simulated reflectivity. Let's do the convergence zone and just let that play out here. You can see it kind of keeping it alive for a while there, mainly up north of Everett. But pivotal weather is good too, and you can get free soundings on these too. So if we go to and we check out, if you click on the map anywhere, you can see you get an atmospheric sounding here. This is kind of a cross section of the atmosphere. You can see at the surface is 37, the dew point is 32, and you can see the wind barbs. This means a southeast wind, and then above the surface there a southwest wind. You can see it turn westerly and then northwesterly as you go above. So all these different parameters have different meanings. A lot of these times these soundings are used for severe weather outlooks. Try to determine what type of convection, how strong it'll be, if there's a tornado threat versus wind threat or a hail threat. My meteorological background, I've taken classes in college, and I have a technical degree with a Meteorological Technical Institute in Montana. It went defunct in the 2000s. And then I have other aviation weather, another aviation weather degree also, and I have the aircraft dispatcher license as well. And that requires quite a bit of meteorology also. So I have, a lot of weather observing background also. So I have a technical degree and I have an aviation weather degree, and I have a FAA license for aircraft dispatcher also. That's generally my background. And I did weather for several sites: Hillsboro, Oregon, Boeing Field, Seattle, Tonopah, Nevada, Kansas City. Am I leaving one out there? I forget. No, I think that's it. And then I've worked for Island Air in Hawaii. I worked for Hawaiian Airlines. And then I got on with Alaska Airlines eventually. Yeah, working in aviation, it keeps your forecasting skills sharp. You're forecasting for multiple stations each time you're at work. Yeah, I don't know if it's coincidence or not. So Leilani asks, is in 2019, I've noticed that atmospheric river events in the winter, why do we always end up with cold and snow events after? Generally it has to do with Rossby waves and mean trough position. So if you're digging a very deep trough far off of the out into the ocean, Pacific Ocean, and then you're bringing an atmospheric river up in front of that trough. Eventually things are moving from east to west in the mid latitudes. So eventually that trough gets over you after that atmospheric river goes. I've seen people try to make correlations between it. I haven't seen anything really strong that shows that, but so it's still kind of up in the air as far as what I've looked at. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, everybody. So there's something interesting also, speaking of atmospheric rivers. So now we're going to go into a quieter period, then maybe one more atmospheric river, and then we might get a break for a bit. But some of the long-term examples, like look at the European, this is the Weeklies model here. Weeklies, it's called. So you can see the control and the mean on there. And you notice how after we go past mid-January, we kind of go negative for basically the remainder of January and into over half of February there. And this is the Pacific North American oscillation, and Pacific North American oscillation values are shown here. And supposedly when we're in the negative value, the ridging is greatest over the Pacific Ocean, which allows that north flow to come down over the Pacific Northwest, and it allows Arctic air to get down, not only for us, but east of the Rockies and down into the rest of the lower 48 states as well. So when you look at what the PNA was for December, obviously a very cold month last month, you can see negative 2.56. Then if you look at February 2021, negative 0.31. And if we go back to February 2019, can anybody guess what that's going to look like? That's right, it was negative again. So if anybody wants to shout out like a past winter snow event that you remember in the Pacific Northwest, we'll go back. Let's go back and look at the Pacific North American oscillation value for that and try to see if there is more than, if that correlation holds true. I'm working on getting all this data into my spreadsheet also, so I can overlay this with like CTAC, Seattle snow totals, for example, and see if there is a correlation with higher snow amounts and the Pacific North American oscillation. Because these are very handy forecasts sometimes. 1990, yeah, December 1990. Let's look at that one. All the way back to 1990, and where's December? Yep, look at that powerful signal, that negative 1.32. Chris Haynes says December 1996. Oh, I clicked off it. Here we go. Do that again. December 1996, minus 1.23. Strong negative symbol also. January 1950. Actually, PDX 13 says 2008. We'll do that one first. December 2008, minus 1.41. So far, so good. I mean, that's pretty strong signal. January 1950. That's when it started. Look at that, negative 2.34. Very strong signal there. December 1968. Yes, that is a very good example there too. So let's see, December 1968. Minus 1.44. So you guys seeing that correlation there between the negative Pacific North American oscillation and our most powerful or snowiest and coldest months? Newcastle Weather says, what about February when the Pats beat the Seahawks? That was February 2014, I believe. Yeah, we had some pretty cold days that stretch. Minus 0.95 again. So I guess we're like 8 for 8 here. So this is a pretty good correlation. 1976. What happened in 1976? I'm not familiar with that year right off the bat. But let's see what 76 says, and then we can look that up. What month in 1976, Phyllis? Oh, Gabriel Cox says, hi from Hillsboro, Oregon. Just drove from Pullman between two closures of I-84. So they opened I-84, huh? Okay. Still leaves Seattle landlocked. I guess we can't get down there because of I-5 being shut down. But Portland can get east. November 1985. Let's check that one out. Bronco. Negative 1.90. Very strong signals there. And then you guys look. So looking at this makes a snow lover excited. Check that out. Drops below zero and doesn't come back above negative territory until almost late February there. Yeah, 50 below zero. I can't even imagine that kind of cold. I was out walking my dog when it was like 19 a week ago or whatever that was, and that was frigid enough for me. I'm not used to that. Wow, so that Big Dog says Vancouver, Washington people drove their cars back and forth to Oregon. That rings a bell. I remember hearing something about that, I believe, but I don't know what year that was. If anybody knows the year of that, let's look it up. So yeah, these signals that's a pretty strong signal there. Let's look at the Canadian doesn't go out as far, only till later January, but you see it starts to move into negative territory there later. The GFS shows, this only goes through mid-November, but it shows a cold period at the end of the month here, and then positive afterwards. January 2012, that's a good one too. That was a pretty intense storm for the region. But the thing with 2012 though too is that was kind of an overrunning event. Yep, see, there was kind of troughing out over the ocean there. So we got, we had that huge system move in off the ocean. So that might be obscuring that value a little bit. But that would be one that's not lining up with that correlation of negative being colder, snowier. That's the first one. If you guys are just joining now, Wenatchee, Washington, highest 24-hour snowfall total ever, 23.3 inches. That's just about an inch an hour. Yeah, winter 2008, December 2008, that was strongly negative also. And yeah, Newcastle weather says South Sound got pummeled in January 2012. Yes, we got a pretty good freezing rain event at the airport too after the snow. And that was really, that brought down trees. A tree came down and hit my truck at the time. That was a pretty intense event. And the freezing rain afterward was just barely mentioned by the National Weather Service at the time. And then it started up, and it was pretty significant accumulations for areas of Seattle. You guys seeing some landslides around the area too. I guess there was one in Seattle that killed somebody. And there was one right here by my house, not very far away, maybe a couple miles, and it was pretty big looking. I took pictures, but the pictures don't really do it justice. It was a pretty good slide. It almost took the house away above it. How about May 1940? Oh, the values only go back to 1950, so unfortunately we can't look back at 1948. Landslide warnings. So spring seeps saturated ground areas that have been not typically have been wet before. New cracks or unusual bulges in the ground, pavement, or sidewalks, soil moving away from foundation, broken water line, or other underground utilities. Rapid increase or sudden decrease in creek water levels, a faint rumbling sound. Interesting. Yeah, we get that a lot here. Leilani, she says she moved here from New Jersey in 1990 and didn't understand why everyone was freaking out. Yeah, that's the thing. It's the perfect combination here in the Pacific Northwest of being, especially on the western side of the mountains. It's rare enough to where it doesn't make financial sense to stock a bunch of snowplows, and salt, and yet it happens just enough that you remember the last one. And so it's just kind of that balance of not of it not being common enough to have to really stock for it. And sometimes you'll go a full year and we won't even get a measurable snowfall in Seattle. And then sometimes you get a big month like December of this month. Plus we have so many hills too. That really is a big deal. And then when you have places that are close to the Puget Sound, they're relatively warm. And when it starts to snow, it's usually, the streets are usually a little bit above freezing. So when it starts to snow, you've got that layer of moisture at the surface. And then when things start to freeze, that wet surface is really slick underneath the snow. And then when you pack that snow down, it melts even further and you just get that layer of ice. Yeah, what we had February 2019, a really good snow. And then we had the year off 19 and 20. 2019 and 20, we had just under an inch for Seattle. But some areas up north got more snow that year. And this year is starting out well. I mean, December, of course, you can't complain about that. And of course, this last February, we got, record snowfalls in some areas. Yeah, once you live out here, then it's a different story. Yeah, that's the thing with salt, is it just drains right into the Puget Sound there, and it can really hamper the sound. See how we're doing on the landslide index here. Yeah, it looks like pretty much all the Puget Sound here is still prone to landslides, especially areas Seattle South. Yeah, that DC, what was the deal with that? Why were they stuck on that roadway for so long? It's just intense. I mean, I think that once I'm in the car for 12 hours, I'm probably just going to get out and walk somewhere. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm working on now. Newcastle Weather asks what percentage of December, January, February are negative, and how many of the negative months had a meaningful cold and or snow? So I'm loading that data into my Excel spreadsheet. For example, I've got all of Seattle's records, everything you could think of: fog, thunderstorms, precipitation, temperature, snowfall, even the days that it snowed, all the way back to 1950. And I've got that overlaid with ENSO values, La Nina, El Nino, and I want to overlay that with Pacific North American oscillation and check those patterns out, because I think there's even a stronger correlation between this oscillation and something like El Nino, for example. Yeah, let me include that data. So Richard Connor says he wants to see historical data on accuracy of models. Where can that be found? I'm working on a video where I'm going to include that, and I'm going to talk about ensembles and what they're specifically doing. So I want to bring that at the same time out. But yeah, there are trackers like Canadian, European, GFS, the North American model. It does track the accuracy of those models, and it kind of scores them. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes the European usually does better, usually does best. Same thing happened in Atlanta a few years ago. Everyone sat there for 24 hours. Yeah, you think they'd just start towing cars off the interstate there, I guess. That's a lot of cars, though. There's probably, tens of thousands of cars. Yeah, neutral years can be good snowfall makers too. I think looking at my Seattle data, I think that La Nina was just a little bit ahead of neutral years, and then El Nino years were like noticeably less, like half the snowfall amount that La Nina years produced. Pull that down. So I'm working with this new microphone and boom arm here, so I'm just kind of learning it. So yeah, how about these passes? All these passes are closed. I-5 is closed. There is really no way through to Eastern Washington from Western Washington. And somebody mentioned going up through Canada earlier, but I would not trust that highway up there. Not a good idea. And trying to go out on Highway 101, I've seen 101 closed at times today. And that's just a huge, long, dangerous drive. I-95 had no change. Yeah, that'll do it. I mean, without traction tires and stuff, it's tough. Yeah, Snoqualmie Pass, I think, is almost double their average snowfall for this time of the year. Just an amazing amount of snow up there. We're going to drive by up there in the spring, and we're just going to still see huge walls of snow as you go over the pass into Eastern Washington. And it's going to be like, yeah, that was a lot of snow we got last winter. So is Amtrak still running right now? Big Dog says use Amtrak. I know nobody wants to see this, but I'm just kind of been watching this next atmospheric river. Check this thing out. This is Monday morning here, and you can see that our next atmospheric river getting going there. Big Dog says, yes, Amtrak is going. Well, that would be good. I mean, that's a good excuse to take the train for sure. So this is the GFS showing that atmospheric river hitting Washington and mainly British Columbia there. That's a pretty good one for Vancouver Island, but it mainly misses Washington, it looks like. So, but that's a lot of time. This is still 5 days out. But I don't want to see another atmospheric river around here for at least another week or so. So hopefully that forecast changes, but the models have been showing it for a while now. So I'm a little bit worried about that one. Yeah, Roland Connor, Mount Baker ski area got over 1,000 inches of snow in 98, 99. That was a really good one for the Cascades, too. I remember just huge amounts of snow piling up around exit 47 off of I-90, near the fire training academy there. Snoqualmie Pass, just huge mountains of snow everywhere. Gabriel Cox says, I've watched the Atlantic Gulf hurricanes over the last few years, and it seems like the Euro seems to lead those forecasts as well. Yeah, generally it does. It's amazing how much better our hurricane forecasts have gotten over the last decade, too. The 3-day error cone has really started to narrow down. I'll have to go into that eventually here, too. But I don't know how much, how much people in the Pacific Northwest want to hear about hurricanes and whatnot. I think when things slow down, I'll probably start to go out wider and just bring information back about what's going on across the world and cool meteorological events. So let's see I'll check out the European control and see if it shows this. Is it not? No, it's not really showing. No, it does have it too. So the European is also showing an atmospheric river event. Again, mostly getting Vancouver Island. But that's a pretty good signal on Vancouver Island there. I mean, that would be... but this is the year, isn't it? It looks like British Columbia has just been in the bullseye for the last 8 months now. That heat dome... Yeah, atmospheric river kind of looked like a fist there. Yeah, there's little microclimate stuff that goes on here that's pretty interesting, like marine layer pushes when we get hot in Western Washington and Oregon. And then usually there was a result of a thermal trough, and that thermal trough builds right over the western portions of the state. And then inevitably it starts to move east And as it does, you get the pressure gradient from the nice cool Pacific just to rush in there. And sometimes you can drop the temperature by 25 degrees from, from 90 to 65 or from 95 to 70 in one day. I love those marine pushes too. Sometimes, you spend 2 or 3 days above 90 in Seattle, and then you get a marine push and you wake up and it's just in the mid 60s, and it's just a nice, glorious cool down. Yeah, Roland Connor talking about the 4 feet at Leavenworth, state of emergency. Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's people that are just kind of stuck there that are probably just walking around the town, but you probably having a really hard time getting around out there. And I don't know where you would go. Highway 2 is closed, so. Mother Nature's air conditioning. Yeah, I love the marine pushes. They're great. I'm going to click the light down here a bit. There we go. Is that a little better? That's better. Yeah, I mean, there are literally hundreds of microclimates around Washington and Oregon, British Columbia. From little things like, some places are low-lying areas, and when you get a clear night, that cold air just kind of slopes down the hills, and the cold air will sink and gather in those valleys or low-level basins. That's one example. So you can be, 10 plus degrees colder than just the hill just a half mile away. You've got stuff like dust devils in eastern Washington. Stephen Hotro, I love this channel. Yep, thank you. Glad you guys are enjoying it. Yeah, the dust devils in eastern Washington. Sometimes those, eastern Oregon gets them pretty good too. Down the Willamette Valley actually gets some pretty good dust devils too. I love those little things. It's just fun to watch, spinning air, and it's just one more weather forecast to do. There's certain parameters that need to be met for dust devils, and it's fun to watch those. Yeah, wasn't that the year, that Mount Baker year, was the ski lifts were stuck in that deep snow? I mean, what a year that was. Imagine a ski area having too much snow where it could not operate, and it had to clear out the snow so the ski lifts could run. I remember them running just above the level of the snow there. Really incredible. Mission Ridge and Wenatchee is closed. Yeah, what a thing. I mean, there's just so much snow that ski resort's not even open. That's counterintuitive. So does anybody know when Mount Baker set that world record for snowfall 98, 99, who held the world record for most snow in a year prior to that? Does anybody know that answer? Is a dust devil made from layers of coolant? Well, yes. So with the dust devil, you want the sun to be at a high angle so it will warm up the surface, and you kind of get superheated air right at the surface and just above, and it starts to build up. And then you kind of want a little bit of a tinge of cool air above that, like a day after a frontal system passes through. You've got nice clear skies so the sun can really warm the surface, and just a little bit of cool air above, and you can get some really good dust devils in those conditions. Yep, Paradise. Everybody knows that one. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5 answers right there. So yeah, we held it for Mount Rainier, lost it and gave it up to Mount Baker, and we still have that record as of now. I think Crystal Mountain, wasn't it Crystal Mountain in 1994 had the record snowfall in 24 hours, or it was close to it. I think a place in Colorado has since beat it by a few inches. But it's almost like cheating out there because their snow is very dry and ours was much more wet in that event. So we had much more precipitation in the event. They just had a drier type of snow. But I think there was close to 66, 68 inches of snow in 24 hours near Crystal Mountain in 94. Yeah, there's a lot of volcanic action going on around now too, like Phyllis says there. Crazy times we're living in. Pretty active. Always something to keep you entertained in the world, it seems like. Portland, January 2017. Let's look at that one. Just slightly positive that year. So yeah, these teleconnections and oscillations are not going to be perfect, but there is a signal. I think we rattled out the first 9 and they were all negative. Then we hit a couple that were positive, but for the most part, it's a pretty good marker of probability. Yeah, Japan was getting hammered with snow. I don't know what it's been like recently. Oh, let's look at here. I want to look at the GFS here, and I want to look out a little bit more. Let's look at the North Pacific, and let's do. So here comes our next atmospheric river event, right? Oh, this is the brand new GFS running. Let's go back to the 18Z since it goes out further. There's our next atmospheric river event coming on there. This one looks to impact BC and northern Washington more, though. So maybe it'll give southern Washington a break. Hopefully it does. I don't think we could handle another one of those without just devastating effects. It's already bad enough. But yeah, like we were talking about last night, you can see usually in the winter, there's 2 to 3 atmospheric rivers going at any one time across the Pacific Ocean. Gordon's asking, what is your background? So how it started was I went to a meteorological technical institute in Montana, and it was to learn about weather observation and aviation weather. And it was 8 hours a day for like 3 months of just intense aviation METAR coding. So you learned everything about weather observing. And there was also theoretical stuff in there too. But then I got a job at Tonopah, Nevada, and then I ended up working for Boeing Field in Seattle, SeaTac in Seattle, Hillsboro, Oregon, and I worked at Kansas City also. So basically working as a contractor for the National Weather Service. And then I went on to working for Island Air in Hawaii, and I did the weather for them and some training, and I started to work at Hawaiian Airline, and then I worked for Alaska Airlines for like about the last 13 years now. And I have an FAA license with a flight controller, aircraft dispatcher license, which requires quite a bit of meteorology also. And I've taken quite a few college courses in meteorology. So if you're asking, I have a technical degree and I have an aviation degree and an FAA license. The ATIS would take the data that I would put out. So Gabriel Cox says, did you do the ATIS at most of these places as well? And I would put out the weather data. But like the ATIS will have, for example, like runway closures, taxiway closures, and things like that. But I just did the weather part of that. Howdy from the Olympic Peninsula. Yeah, what's with these high tides, these extremely high tides? That new moon a few days ago had some extremely high tides in the Puget Sound. And I saw Three Tree Point this afternoon. The tide was this morning, and it was really high, and the wind was going pretty good, and these huge waves were just slamming some of the homes down there. As if there wasn't enough going on, we need, super high tides and big waves hitting the houses. Yeah, these king tides. January is that time of year. So you guys see the convergence zone going on tonight probably, huh? You can see the winds wrapping around the Olympics there and meeting kind of north of Everett. Is it still going on here? Yep, that convergence zone just will not go away, will it? Keeps chugging along there. Probably still snowing there. Snoqualmie Pass through Stevens Pass, all up through the Cascades there. Boeing Field almost went below ILS mins this morning. Yeah, but I mean, I didn't actually look at their observations today, but hello from Bellingham. I have about 1 inch of snow at my house after the melt. Yeah, what an intense winter so far. I mean, hopefully we get a bit of a break here though, because it's fun to get this extreme weather, but we're at real risk of landslide damage here and potentially significant landslides. I think we're right on the precipice. If we got any more rain right now, it would be devastating all across Western Washington into parts of Western Oregon. Yeah, Carl Fisher says king tide in Vancouver, BC is a sign of what's ahead as the seas rise. Yeah, I mean, people kind of balk at when you add just like 1 foot of sea level, but that's a huge deal. I mean, because every storm is just 1 more foot of water you have to worry about now. And then, of course, when you get a storm and you get water pushed up or collected by high winds or the pressure is lower, then that 1 foot is going to be exacerbated. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen that barge in Vancouver Island or in Vancouver on the beach there, it's still sitting there. So you guys go Google that. Barge in Vancouver, British Columbia. Washed up there in one of the storms. Yeah, kind of a quiet night down there in Oregon tonight, huh? Probably still some flooding going on the rivers there, but yeah, pickle snout. Higher water at the coast means Dungeness backs up a bit more. Yeah, anytime there's high tides, the rivers have even more problems draining. That water has to go somewhere. And if it just runs into the ocean, it's just going to back up back into the river or just at least slow the drainage of that river water. Yeah, SeaTac, 2 inches of rain in 24 hours yesterday. A new daily record there. These are all 24-hour totals. Some of these are just crazy. I mean, 6.5 inches of rain in 24 hours. That is amazing. Yeah, that's good though. Quiet is good. It looked like the Skookumchuck there by Chehalis was going to crest above its record stage, but they since downgraded that forecast a bit. So it looks like it's cresting now into tomorrow morning. So maybe I-5 won't get closed down for a week. Hopefully it's open on Sunday. This is precipitation totals coming up. You can see Vancouver and some areas, the Cascades, get hit really hard here next week. So it might be British Columbia's turn to get a little bit of flooding next week. Hopefully not. Maybe this will change. But if it does, I hope it doesn't point the bullseye back at Western Washington, because I don't think we'd be able to handle that without some extreme events. No, I haven't been. Gordon asked if I keep track of Northern California reservoirs. I just know that, they've been having a hard time down there and they need all the snowpack they can get. They actually need probably a few years of snowpack build up to replenish the aquifers and the reservoirs there in California. And they're doing it during an El Nino year. And, they get more rainfall during they're doing it now during a La Nina year. And then when El Nino comes, they tend to get heavier rainfalls there. So maybe they'll replenish some of the water deficit. Yep. Welcome, everybody, if you guys are just signing in now. I've got about 15 more minutes I can be here, then I have to tend to something with my children. But I will have another video out tomorrow morning, like always. And then I like doing these live streams too. It's fun talking with everybody. This is next week. You can see some of the ensemble members. There's a couple pretty beefy totals for SeaTac next week, but there's a lot of less than an inch there. So that wouldn't be too bad, but I wish we'd get like a week break from this rain. It was interesting kind of seeing when I went driving around the neighborhood today, you could see just a lot of water running off hilly parts. Like the water was still trying to drain out of the hilly areas or, the cliffs. Here's the European model, has a bit less in the ensembles. The control run has almost an inch, but this atmospheric river looks better for Western Washington versus. But as you go up more towards BC here, you can see some of these members have some pretty good totals. So we'll have to watch that system as it comes in here. Yeah, maybe a snowy Valentine's would be fun. I would not mind that. I love snow anytime. So yeah, if you guys are just joining and you have any kind of old winter storm memories, tell me the month and the year, and we'll go back and look and see what the Pacific North American oscillation showed. There seems to be a strong correlation between negative values and very cold, snowy periods for Pacific Northwest. So Journey Hawk asks, what determines what years are La Nina versus El Nino? So let's look at, I believe I had this one up. I'm just going to pause this. So here, I'm going to go temperature. So if you can see this map here, this is Hawaii here. There's an area out here that they measure the water temperatures, and it's right about here that they base what is El Nino conditions versus La Nina conditions. In fact, I'm just going to bring up a map here so I can show you a little better. And we'll do images, and we'll just go, this looks like a good one. Click on that, and we'll just zoom in on this. So when we have La Nina conditions, you have cold water building off the coast of South America, and that means the trade winds are stronger because they're pushing that warm air that builds on the surface of the ocean that's heated by the sun. That water gets pushed off to the west, and it builds up, tends to build up more here off the Asian continent, and we get colder water here. And so when you get heat built up here, Siberia is naturally very cold, and you kind of get this strong gradient between the cooler air over the continent and the warm air from the ocean that's built up there. So you get the strong jet stream coming off the Asian continent here. And what happens then is because you have a strong jet stream there, it tends to cause ridging downstream, and that ridging happens here. And that's kind of what happened in December, a typical La Nina pattern. And that allows for north flow over us, or at least a weaker jet stream. So we get more variability in the winter. During an El Nino year, we get warm water built up over here, and that kind of backs up all the way towards Hawaii, and we get warm water here. And we have a gradient that kind of points that weaker jet stream at California, but it also kind of keeps us warmer than normal because we get that southwesterly flow through the west coast of North America. And so we don't get that variable jet stream. We don't get those cold air intrusions as much in El Nino years. And there's always exceptions to every rule. We have had winters that are El Nino to bring us good snowfall. So there's always exceptions during any kind of ocean teleconnection pattern. There's always an exception or not. 1989, second week of February. Yeah, that's probably the most significant Arctic outbreak I've ever seen in my life in the Pacific Northwest. February 1989. It really doesn't get any more classic than that. And as you can see there, that is a negative value there. So that matches up well. And let's see what we're talking about there. So if we look at the European weeklies, this is extended. This is currently January 6th was when this model was run here. So if we go out, we see we're in the positive values until about the 16th. And then we start dropping into that negative Pacific North American value. And we stay there until late February. So this is a very cold signal for the Pacific Northwest. That would allow for Arctic air intrusions more often, at least more likely for that. And see these negative values here? These correlate with these negative values here, like February 1989 and December 1990 and December 1996 and December 2008. All those years were negative. January 1950, the mother of all winters here for the Pacific Northwest. Carl Fisher, Columbus Day storm, 1962. Yeah, that was an intense storm. That, it was an old decaying tropical system there. It moved across the ocean, and it basically met up with some colder air in a trough off the west coast of North America, and it really spun up a terrific storm. It's probably, anybody listening to this chat now will probably never see a storm that strong to hit North America again. It was really a unique storm, probably 1 in 1,000-year storm or even greater. That's not to say it can't happen. I mean, it could happen next week for all we know, but it's such a unique, rare, extraordinary setup, that Columbus Day storm. Yeah, Ryan says when he was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot more winter weather in Beaverton when I grew up. There is some truth to that, and even the great Cliff Mass agrees on that one, that cold air intrusions are less likely to get into Western Washington and Oregon than they were in the past. Just the general lack of the ice buildup keeps cold air. You don't get the depth of the cold air that you once got. You can really see it in temperature patterns from the 90s to currently. We've really stopped getting those extremely cold temperatures that we used to get back in even just the 80s or the 60s, 50s. Or even back, in the early 1900s or the 1800s. We just don't really get there anymore. And that's because we have mountain ranges that cold air has to travel over in British Columbia. And if it's not deep enough, it really just can't make it over those mountains the same way, or it warms up much more and we just don't get single digits anymore here. Yeah, Big Dog says the wind's 116 in downtown Portland. Yeah, that was an exceptional storm. I mean, there are so many wind records based on that storm. December 1991. I don't remember what happened in December 1991. Was there a big snowfall during that? It looks positive. I don't recall what happened during that month, though. Gabriel Cox says, was it a hurricane? No, it wasn't warm water driven. It was the result of temperature differences in the mid levels of the atmosphere. It was at one time, it was Hurricane Frida. So it had a lot of water vapor, heat content with it. So it just kind of contributed to the big pressure gradient when it met that trough off the west coast of North America. Yeah, Western Oregon got hit really hard with the Columbus Day storm. I've tried to see when this landslide index seems to update. The time updates. I don't know how often they update these values though. Looked into the Davis Vantage Pro equipment. What is a good setup to dip our toes into this sort of weather enthusiasm community? I would get, I mean, it depends on how serious you are in observing weather based on what kind of weather station you want to get. If you want to get really accurate readings, you should get the Davis Vantage Pro, where you can separate the anemometer from the thermometer and the rain gauge. Otherwise, you're kind of dealing with a gimmick, because if you put the thermometer where the rain gauge and the anemometer are, then you're not going to get that accurate of readings. Your wind is going to be too low if it's down low, and if you put that thing on your roof, then your temperature reading is going to be messed up, and your rain gauge is going to get water blown out of it, and there's going to be problems there. So if you want accurate data, get the Davis Vantage Pro model. Yeah, the windstorm December 1985, that was a colossal storm too. A really big storm. 60-mile-per-hour gusts at Seattle. There was much bigger gusts along the Oregon coast. I think over 120 miles per hour. Yeah, so I hope that answered your question on the outside Tillamook. Want to get some accurate rain readings. I mean, yeah, so the thing to remember about your rain gauge is set it as low as you can without getting splashing off the ground back into the rain gauge. Because the higher you set the rain gauge, the more wind will get in there and it'll scoop some of that water out. So you want to try to get your rain gauge pretty low. I have mine at 4.5 feet along with my thermometer. And then I have my anemometer on the roof with guy wires and a huge pole like 32 feet off the ground. Yeah, I have a really good anemometer on my house. That Galloping Gertie Tacoma bridge, yeah, that was just the frequency of the wind caught that bridge, and not a good design back then. They didn't have any kind of, you notice how they have graded roadways on bridges now so the wind can pass through. And back then it was just a layer of cement. So if the wind caught that and the frequency caught it right and just kept the reverberation in the bridge, and eventually until it failed. I got 2 minutes here, guys. Yeah, I wish I could chat longer. If I do a live feed tomorrow, I'll be able to chat longer, but I have to get off here in a couple minutes. Yeah, the low of the Columbus. Well, yeah, it's a little bit different process on that between the heat low that hit Western Washington and Oregon in the summer was basically the reflection of the huge ridge over British Columbia and just north of Washington, the huge ridge. So by default, it leaves a low pressure over Western Washington and Western Oregon. So what we call as a thermal trough. And when that air flows from that huge ridge over the mountains into Western Washington and Oregon, it kind of tends to, become a low pressure. And then it's so warm when it compresses off those mountains that it rises, and that's why the pressure is low. But yeah, that's why we got that thermal low was the result of the huge ridging over British Columbia. Yeah, thanks. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Hope you're enjoying the videos. They'll get more educational as we slow down here a bit too. I'll get, like we're going to talk about ensembles. We'll talk about microclimates. We'll talk about all kinds of things. So I'm going to wrap this up now, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning. I hope you tune in for the video tomorrow, and we'll go over what's coming up and the flooding, and look at see how the landslide potential is doing, and we'll see how the atmospheric river looks like it's doing, and we'll watch some of the teleconnections on into the future here and see if that cold signal sticks around, and see if it's something we can watch all the way into February. Yeah, I've been trying to mention Northeast Oregon. I'll keep doing that, especially when you guys are getting good weather. Yeah, thanks guys for stopping by. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Hopefully tune in for the video. Thanks everybody.